There are a lot of AI audio generators out there, and I know a lot of authors are interested in which one is the best one for audiobooks in particular, but also for other use cases as well. And in this video, I'm going to compare four of these services. We're going to look at them in regards to pricing, convenience, and of course, the quality of the audio itself. So let's dive in. I know for me personally, I am lucky enough to have enough of an income that I can afford to have human narrators, and I do hire maybe like 4 or 5 books each year to be narrated, but most people cannot do that. And also, I actually produce more books than that. And so for the other books that I produce, I just don't have audiobooks for those. And hopefully the income can rise a little bit more, especially as I start putting all of this content out so I can afford more human narrators. But in the meantime, I think it's okay to have as a backup the AI narration, because this is something that we didn't have access to before, and we're not necessarily taking money away from the human narrators. We're just providing us with options that we didn't have before, particularly for authors that have a lower budget. Now, I know I'm going to get some people asking, like, why are you even using human narrators? AI is getting so good. It's definitely not there yet. Even the best ones that we're going to talk about in this video are not there yet. Perhaps at some point it will be, but a good human narrator, certainly like the kind that's doing voices and acting and all of that, is something that AI just cannot do yet. So we'll see if it gets better with time. But that said, let's go in and actually look at these 4 different tools to see which one is the best. The first one that I have here is called Revoicer. And Revoicer was brought to my attention. I'd heard about it before, but the reason it was really brought to my attention is because if you look at the pricing, you can actually get a lifetime plan for it for $67. Now, having gone through and purchased this, I can tell you there are a ton of upsells, so beware for that. But honestly, for most people, you would not need to have those upsells unless you have a specific need around the thing that they're trying to upsell you on, or if you are producing an awful lot of content. But for this, for $67, you can get that 600,000 characters per month of narration, which is a really sweet deal. And in terms of affordability, this is probably the best one out there right now in terms of price to the number of generations you get. And we're going to have to talk about how many characters, like what does this mean when it says we get this many characters a month? So I actually brought out this character counter. If you put in 600,000, that gives you an equivalent of roughly 92,000 to 120,000 words. So you can expect to get at least a full book's worth of text from the generation that it gives you. And in some cases, depending on the size of your book, you could even go to like 2 books because if you write shorter fiction, like romance or something like that, you could easily do this shorter, get 2 books in per month. So this is a very affordable deal. So that checks off the first thing that we really want to look at is affordability. But let's look at the other 2 things, convenience and the actual quality of the prose. So inside of Revoicer, it looks something like this. You come over here and you access the voice that you want. Now, on the $67 plan, you only have access to some voices, and you can preview some of the others, but you can't actually get audio for those, so you would have to upgrade for those. Additionally, one of the things I didn't really like about this is that there's really no way to sort through these other than by language. So there's not even a way to sort by like gender or something like that. And to be fair, most of them did not have a very good interface when it comes to sorting through voices. I think that's something that almost everybody could improve on. But I did find a voice that I liked for this particular thing. And so just so everyone's aware, this project is a like horror thriller kind of thing. So I wanted a really darker tone, something that was a little spooky, a little bit grave. And all I had to do was take my first chapter of that book, paste it in here, and you can see it. That chapter is approximately 10,000 characters, and then I would hit generate audio. So it was a relatively easy thing to do, to just come here and generate audio. But now let's actually take a look at what it actually sounded like. All right, so here is the audio from Revoicer.
Once we have them, it is as if they are carved into the very soft matter of our... I should say it is almost 5 years to the date that I last visited that dead, great place that lies upon the edge of Father's ground. Tonight might, perhaps, be the most unpleasant, uninviting night that I have ever witnessed.
And as you can tell, the audio is really not good here. It sounds very robotic. It gets to certain pauses and things, and it pauses unnaturally, or pauses too long, or doesn't pause at all. And I just found, of the four that I'm going to talk to you today, even though this one is the most affordable, this one is also, sadly, the worst in the quality of its narration. It might be useful for certain use cases that you might have, but for full-on audiobooks, do not use Revoicer. It was not my favorite at all. I'm sure there's a slight improvement on the Pro plan with those other Pro voices, but I guarantee you it's not going to be as good as what we've got coming with these next three. So the second one is called Fish.audio, and it's one that, again, I actually didn't know about this one, but it was brought up inside of my community, which, by the way, linked to the Story Hacker community down below. It is the best place, I may be biased, but it's the best place to go from nothing to having your book in hand, and to go and learn that entire process so that you can actually have that book for you. And not just that, but actually go through the steps to learn marketing and get people on your email list and all of that. The whole process is outlined there, so go check that out. But one of my members did mention this tool. When I looked at it, I was really impressed with the pricing of it. So first of all, you get unlimited generations, which is awesome. And if you do it monthly, it's $15 a month. If you get it yearly, that's it comes down to $9.99 per month, but paid on a yearly basis. So $120 for a year, which is a very, very good price. And all in all, I thought, pricing wise, this is by far, next to Revoicer, this is definitely the cheapest one. If we go and actually look at the interface, some parts about this I actually liked. I liked their selection of voices. I could come here and select advanced audio story, name my project, select the voice that I wanted. Once again, there wasn't a whole lot of being able to sort through voices. And if I hit explore here, they do have some from like actual people, which I don't know how they legally are allowed to do that. I kind of get the sense that they're not, but they have a bunch here. They do take a little bit of a while to load, and there's no way to sort through them other than by language. There are some tags here that you can do, but I found that nothing that I selected actually had an option available for it. So not the cleanest interface there. And then once you've created your project, you can put your manuscript in here. Now, I had a big problem with this process because it required that each paragraph be a certain length and not any longer. And so what that meant is that sometimes it would just give me an error and wouldn't paste what I put in there until I had essentially broken up the paragraphs, which is insanely tedious if you're going through and putting your chapters in here. And it just was quite a bit of work. But ultimately, I did get the first chapter in here to try it out. I thought certain things looked good, but then I realized that there was no button to generate the entire thing at once. Until I realized that I could come here and select play until the end, and then paragraph by paragraph, it would play through it and generate the next paragraph as it was going. But that means that in order to generate the whole thing at once, it had to play through the whole thing. So that took a while. Not something that, I being a busy entrepreneur would have much time or patience for. Maybe I was missing something, but I really tried to figure it out, and it just didn't seem to be a good way of doing it. But once it was all complete, I was able to go here to export project and export it as a file. And this is what it sounded like.
Isn't it remarkable how some ideas never leave our minds once we have them? It is as if they are carved into the very soft matter of our brains. I should say it is almost 5 years to the date that I last visited that dead grey place that lies upon the edge of Father's grounds. Tonight might, perhaps, be the most unpleasant, uninviting night that I have ever witnessed. The rain lashes hard against my window, sounding like an intruder trying to force his way in. As the glass rattles in the window frame, a bitter chilliness ekes its way into my quarters. I'm shivering even when I am wrapped up to my neck in my bedsheets. Yet all I can think of is running my hands against the cool stone. The most peaceful place I can imagine is that immortal monument of stone, the padlocked mausoleum. to which I have always been drawn.
All right, so pretty good, actually. This is fantastic narration. I have noticed on this one, I went through and listened to the whole thing, that it had a lot of artifacts in it, little like screams or just moments where the narrator just started speaking in a different tone that wasn't at all the tone that he had been speaking in previously or that I wanted. And this especially happened with dialogue. The dialogue felt very unnatural, even though on a line-by-line basis, it sounded great. But putting it all together, it didn't sound as good. That said, for the price, this is absolutely fantastic narration. I would say you should much rather go with this one over Revoicer. But the little quirks to the narration did really stand out to me, and I feel like if I was a reader listening to this in an audiobook form, it would take me out of the narration quite frequently. And combining that with what I think is a pretty poor interface makes this one not for me. Granted, the price does make it pretty attractive, so if you're willing to put in the time to tweak every line and everything to make sure it sounds good, because you're going to have to regenerate a lot of things and also edit out a lot of the little artifacts and stuff like that. If you're willing to put in that time, this one might be good for you, but on the whole, it's not something that I plan on using. So let's go to the third item on our list, which is Play.ht. Now, I've actually been aware of Play.ht for quite a while, and I've used it in the past. But I really wanted to get a side-by-side comparison with it and these other tools to see just how good it actually is. And so this one works very similarly. You'll notice it's quite similar to the interface that Fish.audio has. You put your text in here, and this one also does unfortunately have a limit of how big your paragraph can be, but that limit is much bigger than what Fish.audio does, and I noticed that I wasn't actually running into it for this particular chapter, but for instance, this paragraph did run, but if it were maybe twice this size, it probably wouldn't have. But thankfully, I'm at least able to paste it in here. Fish.audio wouldn't even let me paste it in if it was too long. Here it at least pastes it in, and if it is too big, I could just come in here and hit space and it would be, or hit enter and it would be fine. So it's a little bit better of an interface for that particular issue compared to Fish. But the way this works is you come here to new file and you want to make sure you're selecting this play dialogue, which is their most advanced model here for text-to-speech. And then it'll give you, by default, it has this Nia voice, and you can just click on the Nia voice, and here will be a list of other things. Now, once again, there isn't really good sorting here. So you really have to go through these and spend a lot of time trying to find your right voices, and there's just a lot of skipping through stuff, like different accents that you don't want, etc. It'd be really nice if I could just say male or female or British accent, American accent, you know, that sort of thing. But I'm not able to do that here. I did find one that I liked, so if I go back to recent files, this one named Atlas I thought was appropriate for this particular story. So in terms of the interface, it's not bad. I think it's an improvement, but still some things that I don't really care for. For as far as pricing goes, there is a free plan. It'll only give you 1,000 characters, so that's really just enough to test out a few lines right there. There's the creator plan, which if we look at this at the monthly, it's $40 a month, but they'll give it to you for $19 for the first month. And then their unlimited plan is $99 a month. But the nice thing about the $99 plan is that it gives you unlimited characters per month. And if you can afford it, if you upgrade to annual, the unlimited plan will actually be half off. So it'll be $588 annually, and you get unlimited generations, which I think is super generous. But this is more expensive than the first two that we looked at. Not as expensive as the last one that we're going to see, but definitely a good deal to get unlimited characters per year for essentially what comes to $49 per month. But if you're just trying it out, then maybe you want to try the creator program for a month, and if that works, upgrade to an annual for the unlimited. I would really only use the unlimited if you have tons of books that you want to get out there, or just really high use cases. So that is the pricing for Play.ht. Let's see what it actually sounds like.
Isn't it remarkable how some ideas never leave our minds? Once we have them, it is as if they are carved into the very soft matter of our brains. I should say it is almost 5 years to the date that I last visited that dead gray place that lies upon the edge of Father's grounds. Tonight might, perhaps, be the most unpleasant, uninviting night that I have ever witnessed. The rain
All right, so from that brief little introduction there, you can tell it's very good. There are some slight weirdnesses with the way he's phrasing things, but I would say the quality is on par and actually slightly better than what Fish was giving us. In fact, I would definitely say the quality is much better than Fish, and it has almost zero artifacts in it, which I was really impressed by. And I have actually indeed used Play.ht for other projects. It is particularly good for nonfiction, anything that just doesn't require dialogue or anything like that. This did do dialogue, and it did it pretty well comparatively. Having listened to this whole chapter, I actually was pretty impressed with the whole thing, and it was very, very clean. And so I would say in terms of like price to quality ratio, this one might be my favorite. It's done a really good job in terms of quality. The interface is okay, not the best, but okay. It's pretty easy for me to just take all my different chapters and just kind of throw them all up there and then generate the whole thing. Is it perfect? No, but for those who really want a cheaper alternative that has really quality generation, this one is definitely one that I like. But we have to take it to the undisputed king right now, at least in the public eye, of audio generation, and that is 11 Labs. So first of all, let's talk pricing. 11 Labs is not cheap. It is by far the most expensive on this list, and I'll show you why that is. So first of all, let's look at what this is if we're doing monthly. They do give you 50% off your first month of this creator plan. Otherwise, it's normally $22 per month, and that's for 100K credits. So 100K, that's 1/6 of what Revoicer gives you per month, and that's $22 a month. And what that comes to, if we look at the character counter, 100,000 characters is going to give you roughly 15,000 to 20,000 words. So this is just barely enough to actually do like one novella per month. This is not enough to do a whole book at that plan. So in order to do whole books, you're going to need a bigger plan per month at least. And so the one you might want to look at is the Pro version, which is $99 per month. If you do it annually, it comes to more like $82.5 per month, which is 2 months free, but that's not a huge discount compared to some of the others, compared to like Play.ht, which gives you a 50% discount on the annual plan. The Pro one, which at monthly is $99, will give you 500,000 credits per month. And that comes to approximately 76,000 to 100,000. So just about the average of a full-length novel. The $99 one will give you that. And so essentially you can expect a full-length novel to cost you approximately $100 using 11 Labs. Certainly that's way better than a human narrator, which for that same length will cost you more like $2,000, but still pretty pricey for those who don't have much to go on. But for the powerhouses out there who really want the best deal ever, the most value you'll get is on the scale or the business side. The scale is $330 per month. The business is $1320 per month. If you're like a business and you're churning out all kinds of books left and right, you might want one of these because it gives you 2 million credits per month at this one, which is significantly better. If we look at the calorie counter, 2 million looks something like 300 to 400,000 words. So that's several books per month that you could generate right there, but still very pricey, I'd say, for what it gives you. And it would be nice to have maybe just a little bit more generations for what it does. So the question really becomes, does it make up for it in its ease of use and its interface and usability, as well as the actual quality of the generation? So let's take a look at that next. If you want to use 11 Labs, you go to the app and you can select from any of these options right here. Audiobook is, of course, the one that I'm interested in. So you click on that. It would come up with this thing where you can just upload the entire document. And this is one of the things I like about 11 Labs is you don't have to kind of go chapter by chapter, or in the case of Fish, you really have to go paragraph by paragraph because it won't let you paste the whole thing in there. With 11 Labs, it's super easy. You just upload your document and boom, it is incorporated. You can select what the default voice is going to be, and then you hit create. Also, this feature right now is in alpha, which is this auto-assigned voices thing. I don't know if everybody has access to this, but I do. I didn't even realize I had access to it until I started making this video. But you can actually auto-assign voices where it'll point out all of the different voices and characters inside of your novel and assign a different voice to each of them, so it'll come off as this kind of audio drama. And we're going to look at how effective it was at doing that in just a second. But once you've done this, if you're doing just one voice, you just go to your novel here, go through each of the chapters, make sure they're accurate and everything, and it has this interface, which makes it actually really easy to look through. So you could come here and just hit play, and it will actually just start going. And yes, it is actually generating as it goes along, but it's actually a really clean, smooth process, and you don't have to regenerate it later when you're creating the whole file. So it's just if you want to like see what does this part sound like right here with the dialogue or what have you. But after I saw that there were different voices you could do, I really wanted to test that out because that's something that none of the other competitors offer. So I went ahead and created this whole thing, and all of the others I was generating just one chapter at a time. This one, I actually generated the entire novella because it was just easier. It was easier for me to just bring in the whole novella than to do like a chapter at a time, which is crazy to me. So I just did the whole thing. So you can see all the chapters are over here. I did have to do some tweaking to like the intro and stuff like that. But then we come here to chapter 1, and this is what it sounds like.
Chapter 1. Isn't it remarkable how some ideas never leave our minds? Once we have them, it is as if they are carved into the very soft matter of our brains. I should say it is almost 5 years to the date that I last visited that dead, gray place that lies upon the edge of Father's grounds. Tonight might, perhaps, be the most unpleasant, uninviting night that I have ever witnessed. The rain lashes hard against my window, sounding like an intruder trying to force his way in.
As you can tell, the vocals are absolutely fantastic. Caveat, I have noticed that using 11 Labs, there are good voices and there are bad voices. Some sound way better and more natural. And so part of the game in 11 Labs is finding the right voice. But there are thousands of voices, and you can actually generate new ones just out of whole cloth. And so those kind of voices, like, you have to sort through them, but when you find them, they're great. And I was really interested to see how this did with dialogue and finding the different characters and things like that. Now, over here on the left, it's got a list of all of the different characters that it found. You will see some like this that says unknown character, and that's because there is a random character that just has 1 or 2 lines. So I left this one, but there was another one that it had that said unknown character that was actually another character called Farmer Burgess, who it also identified here. So I just combined the two. That was relatively simple to do. But I was actually impressed with how well it was able to identify characters and the character dialogue. For instance, here's a little bit of dialogue right here. If I just hit play on this.
Nothing concerning, I assure you, I say.
You know that is hardly an explanation. Your father will have questions for me.
Father is not here.
He returns in the morning.
At which time I shall be back in my bed, sound asleep, as though I had never left.
So you can tell with this dialogue, a lot of it is unattributed. So we have nothing concerning, I assure you, I say. So this one is attributed. It knows that this is the main character, Jervis. But then this next one, the lineup here was delivered by Hiram, who is the other character in this scene. But this line right here is not attributed to Hiram. And yet, because of the context, it actually knew that this was Hiram. And then that would follow that this one, also unattributed, would be Jervis again, and then Hiram again, and then Jervis again. So it actually got that right, and I saw several places in the story where it got that right. So I was really impressed by that. I was even more impressed when I went to the final chapter here. And in this final chapter, spoiler alert, unfortunately, there's a character that shows up. And in the very last line, we learn that this character is Dr. Henry Jekyll from the Jekyll and Hyde story. And he reveals that here in this last line, my name is Dr. Henry Jekyll, and I've been very anxious to speak to you. So it occurred to me, like, would it actually get that the earlier lines of dialogue were this person, Dr. Henry Jekyll, even though he is not called by name, he's just called like a stranger or something like that before this point, and he's only named in this last line? Well, long story short, it did. It got everything perfectly. His lines were absolutely perfectly identified, and it identified them here as Henry Jekyll. And when I go to like select this, you can see his lines here, and these are all of his lines. And it got them all. So it was somehow able to identify, okay, this person talking is Henry Jekyll. And then it was able to go back through and identify all of this person's lines accurately. I was super impressed by that. Given that this feature is in alpha, it's not even in beta yet, this was absolutely impressive to me. Now, the only big problem that I had with this whole thing is that the default voices that it got for most of them, although not all, the default voice for Jervis is the one that I used, and he's the main character. But the default voice for everybody else was kind of not great. And so I spent some time looking through all of the different voices and picking ones that I liked for that character. So you are probably going to have to do stuff like that. But other than that, this was an incredibly smooth process. I was able to upload my book, just, the whole thing all at once. It automatically identified these. I just needed to tweak the voices a little bit and make sure I consolidated some of the unknown characters with other characters that existed. And it did a great job. So in terms of convenience, even though this is the most pricey of the bunch, this is definitely the most convenient. So let's actually take a look at how well it did at these dialogue moments. So let's just play a little bit of dialogue here. You can see this line is actually split in two because we have Hiram saying his line of dialogue, and then the narrator, which is Jervis, saying the dialogue tag and everything here. And then this would be Dr. Jekyll, then the narrator, then Dr. Jekyll again, and then the narrator interjecting in the middle of the paragraph. So it's actually even splitting up the paragraphs depending on who's talking. So let's go ahead and see what this sounds like.
He was a good boy once,
said Hiram miserably.
It sounds as though you cared for him.
Hiram nodded.
And then I must thank you. If I had known that I had any family left in the world, I should have kept a closer eye on them.
The stranger ran a hand against the edge of the coffin, a wistful, gentle gesture.
Not all of us can tame the two halves of our own minds. Not all of us can learn to keep our dark side at peace.
Who are you?
Hiram managed at last.
Are you going to harm me?
I should not dream of it, my dear fellow. Edward Hyde is not here now, and I do not intend to let him attend our meeting.
Hiram suddenly had a feeling of terror, an urge to run. An old news story ran through his mind, a string of gruesome murders, acts of senseless violence that had always remained burned in his thoughts from the first moment he had read about them.
Like your dear friend Jervis, this tomb once belonged to my family.
The stranger finally lowered his glasses, revealing tired, jet-black eyes.
My name is Dr. Henry Jekyll, and I've been very anxious to speak with you. Like your dear...
All right, so you can tell the narration is very good. Compared to the others, I would say it is a head and shoulders above any of the others, even Play.ht. Now, I was concerned when I first started this process because my past experience with 11 Labs is that even though the narration was pretty good, it had a lot of artifacts. So after I had finished doing all my work here, I went and I generated the entire book, which was about 2 hours long, so it's a novella, and listened to about an hour of it, and I did not come across any major artifacts. Sometimes you would get these little moments where the narrator would just like yell or make a sound that was just not natural at all and not part of the text at all. I did not get that once. Sometimes the way it phrases things is not quite right, and that's just normal for all of these tools, but it did even that a little bit less than any of the others. And so I almost hate to say it because this 11 Labs is so expensive, but if you want the best AI audio out there, I really do think this one is still the king. If I had to pick a second one to do, especially if you had like huge volumes of text to do, or if you have nonfiction that you want to do, I would look at Play.ht. It is the one that I've had for the last year or so. And been using it for various capacities, but 11 Labs is just good, you guys. Like, it's just good. And the other thing to consider with 11 Labs is brand recognizability and its position in the marketplace. I remember when a decade or so ago, actually probably like 2 decades ago, my dad was researching different e-readers to use that use the e-ink display. And after all of his research, he was like adamant that the Nook was the one to go with. And I remember thinking, is the brand behind the Nook as powerful as the brand behind the Kindle? And it just isn't. And granted, the Kindle as a piece of hardware is so much more inferior to most of the other e-readers out there today. Even the Nook, I would say. Well, I actually haven't played around with the Nook these days, so I have no idea where it's at. But I actually don't use a Kindle myself anymore because I prefer other hardware. But the nice thing about Kindle is it has Amazon behind it. And so when it needs to, they can spend tons of money to actually make improvements. Not that they really have, so that's maybe not the best example these days. But at the time, my dad was adamant that like the Nook was the one because it did certain things that Kindle couldn't. But sometimes it's best to bet on what is more convenient and what has bigger brand power behind it. The same is true if you're old enough to remember the whole thing between Betamax and VHS. Betamax in terms of quality was better, but VHS in terms of convenience and the sort of brand power that came behind it was the ultimate winner. And so given the convenience factor especially, but also just knowing that 11 Labs has really placed itself as the king in this space, and so all of the investment money is coming to 11 Labs, I think that makes it still the one to watch, because even if another competitor comes along that is amazing and blows 11 Labs out of the water, because of how 11 Labs has positioned itself, is likely the most future-proof. It will be able to get the funds it needs to improve itself to compete with those competitors. And future-proofing is definitely something that I would want to pay attention to. So the only major drawback about 11 Labs is the price. So if you can afford 11 Labs, I would say go with 11 Labs. It is much more convenient. It is much higher quality. And I am assuming that it will continue to improve in that high quality. But I did really like Play.ht. I really liked Fish.audio as well, but it was absolutely a nightmare to work with from a UI perspective, and because of all of the little artifacts that I got out of it. If it improves in those things, especially for the price that they're offering it now, I would say it would be worth a look as well. Revoicer, don't use Revoicer. For audiobooks, just don't. It may be attractive because of how cheap it is, but the audio quality was the absolute worst of the bunch by a mile. Just don't use it. Those are my thoughts on these 4 different AI audio generators. So I hope this was useful to you, and I will see you in the next video.